Knowledge is having the right answer, but intelligence is asking the right questions. You'll never get to the bottom or the real truth of anything unless you ascertain what the question is. I believe it was Albert Einstein that said if he was presented with a problem, he would spend the first and 1 hour to solve it. He would spend the first 55 minutes ascertaining what is the proper question, and then the remaining 5 minutes answering it. The Pentagon hopes and prays that nobody out there actually asks the right questions. Real quick, though, I want to always be diligent. Say thank you to everyone who continues to join us here at the Florida Maquis YouTube channel. I very much enjoy the discussions. But for those of you who have continued to step up and join us over Patreon, it's a whole different thing. You guys are making a huge difference in my life. You're allowing me to look into things I never had time to before. And in today's video, I'm going to show some evidence of this. Those of you who would like to join us in psychological operations training, it's only $1 per month for everyone. It's even less if you sign up for an entire year. Fully refundable, no risk to you, first 90 days. Whether you sign up for the monthly or whether you sign up for the annual first 90 days, it's basically free. And there's hundreds of videos. It's very important to understand that they're going to, meaning the powers that be, try to steer the questions in a certain direction to where they know they have answers. Now also, I would like to give a big shout out once again to Justice Knight, Lisa Haven. They've covered this topic of these very strange craft that are appearing over the north. Now, some of you probably looked at this picture and said, Florida Maquis, how are you going to try to tie this to Antarctica? I believe it's directly tied. To sum it up, I believe what we are seeing, no matter where it is on the planet, whether it's off the coast of California, the Gulf of Mexico, or way up Dead Horse, Alaska, is evidence of a civilization that exists in the deep oceans that primarily calls home Antarctica. And I have visual proof for this. Now, Justice Knight covered earlier today, U.S. pilots approaching object shot down over Alaska said the aircraft interfered with their plane sensors, and others said they could identify this is a really weird way of saying it, they could not identify any propulsion system, and they did not know how it was actually staying in the air. Now, those of you who remember the Nimitz incident off the coast of California way back in 2004, this is exactly what the pilots said, the F-18 pilots said then. They could see no wing, no empennage, no thrust. They had no idea how the thing was moving. Now, I don't think that is any kind of coincidence. And they also identified the shape of these craft as cylindrical and somewhat, in this particular case, grayish or metallic. In the case of the Nimitz, it was white and oblong, but generally speaking, the same thing. Now, Restricted Republic, Lisa Haven, if you haven't watched these guys, you absolutely have to get caught up. They are #1 source for this type of information. They have their own gloves off tactics here. So definitely check these guys out, especially this most recent video titled Super Bowl Disclosure, F-22 Pilots Chilling Alaska, Canada Tic-Tac Shoot-Down, Details Just Emerged. Now, this whole idea of the Tic-Tac craft. What if I told you, those of you who've been with the channel know what we're talking about, I have visual proof, visual evidence that lines up exactly with what, now not one set of pilots, but 2 sets of pilots have said they've seen. I have visual evidence for this. And not only just for the craft itself, but for how the craft moves in and out of Antarctica. Now, in the case back in 2004, they described this craft as being able to move vertically in almost an impossible way, spanning 10, 20, 30,000 feet in a matter of seconds. But when it reached the surface of the ocean, it caused a huge boil, way larger than the craft itself, and then it disappeared below the waves and took off. You see, this is the question. This is the question that nobody wants to ask. How are these craft getting into and out of airspaces? This is the question. Without going through other airspaces. How does anything get to northern Canada airspace without either going through ours or who else? I mean, from over the pole? How is it getting through apparently the Russians and the no country in northern Europe has airspace up there? How are these things just appearing in airspace that is surrounded by other controlled airspaces? You see, that's the key. It'd be like seeing a giant cruise ship show up in Iowa. How the hell would a cruise ship get to Iowa without somebody in Nebraska or Missouri or Illinois or Minnesota seeing it first? You see, that's the key. That's the question nobody wants to ask. Now, when you look at this is Prudhoe Bay, by the way, where they're searching for this craft they allegedly shot down. The details are very sketchy because this is over here. This is where Alaska meets Canada, this line right here. And you look at this and it seems like, gosh, there's nothing up here. But maybe not now. Maybe not at the moment. But depending on where the poles were many thousands of years ago, this could have been a huge, flourishing, fertile crescent with a huge population. What makes you say that? Well, it's the confluence of a couple of rivers. You got this river here, this river here. You have this beautiful sea. Now it's freezing cold up here. But maybe at one time it wasn't. And if it wasn't, could it have resembled something like the Tigris and Euphrates, Persian Gulf, Mediterranean Sea, something like that? This is an artist's representation of what perhaps an area like this might have looked like thousands and thousands of years ago, ancient civilization. But these craft that maybe for so long have been underneath the ice, maybe they aren't aware of the changes or completely aware of the changes that have occurred. And they're going places where there used to be large populations. Another really great example. Remember the Nimitz incident? The Nimitz incident was right down here between LA and San Diego. Maybe in ancient times, LA is still a big place now. Maybe this was a huge center of the world. And now having escaped Antarctica because Antarctica is melting, let's just put that out there. They are discovering that the world has changed greatly. Now, Florida Maquis, you said you had evidence, visual evidence that you could show us that these craft, these oblong, oval, white-shaped craft, have the ability to go in and out of Antarctica and under the oceans with impunity and not be seen. Well, let's start here. I've shown some artist representations. This is not one. This is an actual LiDAR image taken of the giant cavern that exists beneath Denman Glacier. It is tens of miles long and miles high. It is so large, you could easily take a C-130 and take off inside the cavern and get up to altitude, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet. They drop paratroopers at about 1,200 feet, something like that, and fly around and land. That's how big the cavern is. It is that big. Now, let's get to the evidence. Let's go down to Antarctica. These craft have been described as about 25 to 30 feet long and about 8 to 10 feet wide, generally speaking. Now, we've shown this multiple times down here, this cave opening on the side of Antarctica, and we've shown many others like it. And when you look very closely at this, you can see it has been shaped and formed to a very specific size and shape. This isn't random. It's, you can also see the edges here and the walls and how perfectly this was made. I believe it was made for a purpose. Now let's measure. How wide is this? Well, lo and behold, it's about 27, somewhere between 27 and 30 feet wide. Height-wise, about 50 feet. So about 50 by 30. To give you an idea, easily could put 3 cars wide. Think of a 3-lane highway going into the side of this mountain, 50 feet tall, 4-story building, between a 4 and 5-story building, tall. So fairly large. Now, here's the part that's going to blow your mind. What if I told you one of these craft was caught, parked on the surface of Antarctica? You think, no way, right? Well, lo and behold, what did they describe as a tic-tac? Setting right here. And I'll give you these coordinates. You can go use Google Earth Pro for yourself and find this. Now, here's what looks like a giant white tic-tac setting on the surface of Antarctica. Let's measure it. How wide is it? Between 27 and 30 feet wide. How long is it? About 55 feet long. So this craft setting on the surface of Antarctica is the perfect height. The perfect height for this entry over here. It is literally the exact same size. So here would be the craft that they describe. Shape, color, size, everything. Setting on a surface of Antarctica. Here's the opening where it would be coming and going. I don't know how anyone cannot put this all together. I mean, you could say the tic-tac by itself is one piece of evidence that's maybe not. That there would be an opening in Antarctica that perfect size. Okay, that's kind of a coincidence. That's a little strange. But then, when you add in descriptions not of one pilot, not of 2 pilots, but of 2 sets of pilots. There were 2 different pilots in the Nimitz incident, and now 2 different pilots, the F-22s up Dead Horse and North Canada, saying the same thing. Oblong shaped, with no way of determining how it flies, or how it was remaining in the air or moving. And, more importantly, here's the key. Here's the kicker. Here's the most important part. The question they don't want you to ask. The question they don't want you to ask. How is it getting in and out of airspaces just appearing there without going through other airspaces first? Well, that's real simple to my mind. The oceans. If this thing can transit beneath the waves, undetected, sure, it could come right up through here, come right through the Bering Strait, and pop right up. And then disappear the same way. Same thing here. Could be the west coast of the United States is some of the most heavily policed airspace on the entire globe. That these craft could just pop up off the coast of San Diego and LA and do what they did and then just disappear again. Major stories like this out of Mexico as well. The Gulf of Mexico, Florida, this region. Where could they be going? And where could they be coming from? Everybody wants to assume outer space. I don't think that's the case. I truly believe it's something they just don't want to admit. That the fifth largest continent on the planet, virtually unexplored, they don't know nearly as much about as they would like you to believe. See, they'd like you to think that it's all just wind, ice, rock, and snow. But the truth is, so much of it is unexplored. So much of it is unexplored, they can't say for sure. And given how thick the ice, a lot of people don't get that the ice sheet is 2 miles high in places. That from sea level to get to the center of the continent, you would not just be transiting north-south. You would be transiting up into the atmosphere. You would be 10,000 feet off sea level in the center of the continent. That's why some people say it's a giant ice wall. Well, in some technically, in some ways it is. 2 miles high. So the idea that there could be a honeycomb, a giant 3-dimensional honeycomb of all sorts of different things going on inside that ice sheet, nobody could say for sure or not, but one thing for sure, this for sure, is there are questions not getting asked. Because people have been trained to go just one place. Well, if we don't know what it is, we don't know what the entity is, it's not the Chinese, it's not the Russians, it's not us, it must be from Mars. It must be from some other dimension. It must be from some other solar system. Nobody's even considering Antarctica or the deep oceans. Why? Because you've been brainwashed to believe that even though we don't know technically everything about it, we know enough to say definitively there's no possible way. See, that's the real trap. When somebody says, well, we don't know exactly, but we know enough for sure. No. You see, that was the trap of the, let's see, how can I say this without getting censored? The 2020 solution that they wanted to force on everybody. Remember the 2020 sniffles? And then remember a year later they had a magical solution that they wanted you to have a passport for? That magical solution? Well, we don't technically know, but we know what we don't know. And those things we don't know aren't really important, so that type of thing. That's the most dangerous. That's what you got to watch out for. People that aren't even willing to consider the fact that what they think they don't know, don't know, might be way larger than what they've assumed it is. So, I will leave it there. But once again, Justice Knight nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Check this out. It's the questions they're not asking. How could there be conflicting stories from F-22 pilots? It perplexes reporters because they've not been taught to, or they've been taught to not think. They've been taught to not think. Just feel. How does it feel? If it feels uncomfortable, well, let's move on to something that's happier to talk about. Because that's our job. Make everybody watching us feel something positive so they stay tuned in. So, once again, if you want to get read in on this stuff, $1 US, that's it. A month. And that gives you access to all the hundreds of videos we've done over the last 5 or 6 years over there. Fully refundable. Would love to have you. Even less, you sign up for an entire year. It's worth it a time, and it comes out to like 3 pennies a day. Seriously, not really even 3 pennies a day. So, I've set it at a level to make it accessible to everyone. That's why it's just $1. And I'll leave it there. Hope everyone has a good Super Bowl Sunday and enjoys time with family. Be safe, of course. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. And we will see you guys next time.